Mm. Oh, just what I wanted, hair on my chest. Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Heather and as always I'm reading with a vengeance and I hope you are as well. Massive thanks to you OGs who keep coming back, and if you're new to my channel, very warm welcome to you. I hope everybody is doing well. How is everybody's reading doing? I have put myself under the gun. I have no one to blame but myself, but I started the year off with my main goal of reading down my physical shelf before I added new books. And then what did I do? I signed up to be a Booktube prize judge. So I got 6 books assigned to me from February to March. And then what happened? The Women's Prize for Fiction announced their long list. And what do? I set the majority of those on my TBR. I want to read as many as I can before the shortlist gets announced at the end of April. And then what do? I sign up to be a Booktube prize again for the next round. I haven't been selected yet, so there might be hope. And then I would probably have a better chance of getting through the Women's Prize long list. We'll see. So I probably won't be making too much of a dent in my physical library for the next couple of months, but the upside of that is I'm reading a bunch of books that normally wouldn't have been on my radar that I'm really having a good time with. So there's that. So I'm not sure when this is going to publish, probably a little bit later than what I wanted, because I am recording a little bit later than what I wanted. We had a little bit of drama in the house this week. First of all, again, no furniture still. All we have is a bed and 2 camping chairs. Waiting for the military to get their act together so that the moving company can talk to the storage company and they can make a date and gather our stuff and drive down here. Plus the weather that's been going on in Connecticut where our stuff is stored. There's been a delay. So yes, still no furniture here. Also, still no interwebs. And that's an entirely different story, but I can't fact check my stuff, so this is all going to be based on my very fragile memory. So bear with me with that. What was I talking about? Oh yes, drama this week. So if you watched my channel before, you know I have 2 beautiful dogs, the handsome Jake and the very lovely Zoe. Zoe, my absolute apple of my eye, she's 11 years old. Well, speak of the devil, hello. A couple of months ago, I noticed a growth on her neck. And I dragged my feet as far as having it checked out for a couple of reasons. One reason is that our life was in flux and I knew we were about to leave Connecticut and come down to Georgia. I didn't want to start a process up there and then had to restart down here. But if I'm being honest with myself, the main reason is because I was afraid what I was going to find out. Boxers are super prone to cancer. I've lost 3 of them. And so I was terrified. I noticed it was getting bigger. And so I brought her into the vet a couple of weeks ago and basically found out it was a cyst. So that was good news. We set up a surgery date for a few days ago. And she not only had the cyst removed, but she also had a dental cleaning at the same time. So it was a pretty extensive surgery. Because of the location of the cyst. And I'll stop saying cyst because for some reason that word just grosses me out. So I apologize for that. She came out of it with flying colors. I should have led with that, right? She's fine. It's this girl that lost her mind. But a few hours after surgery, at about 8 o'clock at night, she started to bleed a little bit and then her neck got really, really swollen. How shall I say how I reacted? I freaked the fuck out. I called the emergency vet. The tech was talking me through some stuff and I didn't even want to listen to what she had to say. I'm like, just give me your address. I need to get there. And I ended up hanging up on her. So I'm losing my mind. I have Zoe in my arms and my husband is driving. It's 16 miles to the vet, to the emergency vet. Longest 16 miles of my life because it took 20 minutes to get there. We get there and the tech comes out. He basically said in very calm terms that yes, everything looks normal. Everything she's experiencing is normal. Zoe's fine. I aged about 10 years, but Zoe is fine. So anyways, the day that I had planned to record, I just did not have the mental bandwidth. I mean, it was the day after this whole thing happened. And I was just mentally exhausted. And all I wanted to do was just lay in bed with Zoe and make sure that she was fine. How's that for a little slice of life? So I'm here to talk to you about the books that I've read in the first half of March. I'm very happy to have a mid-month wrap-up for you as I didn't have one last month. I got through a decent amount of books. I think I have about 9 of them, to share with you today. Well, first I'll tell you about the books that I read for the Booktube prize. I was assigned 6 books as a Booktube prize judge. I'll link the video that I made talking about those 6 books down below. I can't talk about how I feel about these books until I submit my rankings at the end of March. So the books that I read this month, I've read Liberation Day by George Saunders, and that is a collection of short stories. And I also read Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. I will be doing a separate video once I submit my rankings within a couple of days of doing my second half of March wrap up. I have 1 book left to read. The book I have left to read is The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So the books that I can talk to you about, let's see. The first book that I listened to in the month of March was This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. I put this on my to-do list when I heard that she was coming out with this book because I really enjoyed her other book, which I can't remember the name of and I can't look up. It didn't get good ratings on Goodreads, but I really enjoyed it. And so I picked this one up. Oh, I have it written down in my notes. How about that? All adults here. So if I didn't mention before, I listened to this one. I enjoyed the narration. This follows Alice. And on the eve of her 40th birthday, she goes out, she gets drunk, she passes out, and when she wakes up, she's in her 16-year-old body in her 16-year-old life. In her mind, she's still 40, but everything else is when she's 16. This is a book that involves time travel, but it is not a sci-fi by any stretch of the imagination. This is contemporary fiction with just a smidge of sci-fi because the time travel really isn't what the book is about. But in present day, 40-year-old Alice, she works at a boarding school, a prestigious boarding school, one that she attended in New York City, I believe, or Boston. It might be Boston. Alice lives with her dad, and she has a very close relationship with him. And in present day, Alice's dad, Leonard, I believe, he is a famous author, but he is sick and dying. But her dad wrote a book that has to do with time travel. He's super famous. The book is adapted into either a movie or a series. Very, very well known. Alice leads an okay life. She's somewhat unfulfilled. She has a decent job, but doesn't make her incredibly happy. She has a nice boyfriend, but he doesn't make her incredibly happy. She doesn't really do anything with her life that sparks joy. She goes back, and it's, I believe, the eve of her 16th birthday party. She's got her best friend, and there's a boy that she has a crush on, and she wonders what would happen if she does things a little differently. The main thing that she would want to change is her dad not being sick. The 2 main things that she does when she goes back in time is she tries to change her relationship with the boy she has a crush on and see what changes. And then she also drops a hint to her dad, hey, stop smoking, and see what changes. She ends up going back to the present day. Yes, her personal life has changed very much, but her dad is still sick. She ends up going back, and then she ends up taking a risk, and she tells her best friend, and her best friend is just one of those girlfriends that goes with it, believes her, but then she also ends up telling her dad. And the cool thing is her dad believes her also. And the story goes from there. And this is a story just about a woman who needs to find out what makes her happy. What is her life supposed to be? Because when she made changes that she thought would make her happy, they didn't. This is kind of a self-discovery and a journey of finding out who she is and what she wants in life. The father-daughter relationship I thought was super sweet. I enjoyed reading about that. I really liked these 2 characters. I also found the bit of her being 16 years old with her and her bestie. I found it very nostalgic because I think it's when she's 16, it's either late 80s or early 90s. And I wasn't a teenager at that time, but it was close enough where I really enjoyed just going back in time to a place that I was very familiar with. I connected with Alice on a couple of different levels, just trying to find meaning in your life, which I believe when I was 40, I was kind of doing the same thing. There's something about turning 40. It's pivotal. I remember making some really big changes right around the time I turned 40. So I really connected with Alice on that level, not only when she was 40, but also when she was 16. So that was really fun for me. And as far as the ending goes, I really appreciated how it didn't go the cliche route. You know, you're able to go back in time, you change something, and then you come back and, oh, everything is right with the world and everything is right with your life. No, it didn't go that route, but still it was very satisfying. So yeah, I would recommend this. I gave This Time Tomorrow 4 stars. Next book I read was A Kind of Spark by Elle McNicoll. I was able to find A Kind of Spark at the library, so of course at this point I've already returned it. This one I discovered when a year ago, when I was following the Women's Prize, I did a video celebrating women, and I was looking up new to me authors, and I came across ellemcnicoll, and I added this to my TBR. And I ended up picking this one from my 5 that I'm definitely going to read in my TBR. Was it a random pick? Nope, because my random selection process picked the best rated on my Goodreads TBR. And then what I also realized, well, I didn't realize, a couple of you guys pointed out when I selected A Kind of Spark that it was the perfect time to read in March because it was middle grade March. And the prompt this one meets this year for middle grade March is it features a neurodivergent character. What I found really interesting about this book upon research is that not only does it feature a neurodivergent character, but the author herself is neurodivergent. Kind of Spark follows Addie, and I believe it takes place in Scotland. Addie is an 11-year-old girl. She is autistic. She discovers at school that there is a tree in the neighborhood that used to be used for executing witches hundreds of years ago. And in learning more about these events, she is discovering that the women that were put to death for being witches weren't really witches, and people knew they weren't witches, but they were put to death because they were different. And that hits home for Addie because she is bullied not only by children, but also by adults because she herself is different. So she sets herself a project of asking the city council of the town to put up a memorial plaque for these women who died unjustly. And the story goes from there. Addie is the youngest of 3 children. She's got 2 older twin sisters, one of which is also autistic. They have a special connection. I absolutely loved reading about Addie's relationship, not only with her autistic sister, but the other twin. she's kind of a hoot. She's a YouTuber, does like fashion and makeup and things. And she kind of comes across as a little bit superficial, but there's more to her than you're initially led to believe. There are parts of this story that are really hard to read because not only, I mean, kids are mean just by nature. I think they're just mean. I think there's a certain level of bullying that's just always going to happen regardless of what they're taught at home. I'm not condoning that or anything. It's just a little bit more of the natural child kingdom. However, there are parts in this book where teachers are super mean to Addie, and members of the public and council members, the things they say, the tone in which they say them, it's astonishing. So while that was hard to read, I really appreciated McNicoll putting that in the story. I think she did it in a way, though, just to shine a light on it, to bring it to people's attention, just to be mindful of your words. But the thing that I appreciated most about this book, other than the delightful story, is that it calls out ignorance without villainizing anybody, which I think is super, super important, especially in our current social state of affairs. But even though this was a middle grade book, and even though the main character was 11 years old, I really, really connected with Addie. I connected with her older sister. I think I connected to both of her sisters. I cared about them, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I'd highly recommend it. I gave A Kind of Spark 4 stars. Next book I read in the first half of March is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This has been sitting on my physical shelf for years. I found this at a coffee shop where they kind of had books that you can take and leave. It was kind of like a coffee shop answer to little free libraries. This was probably about 12 years ago. Oh yeah, the coffee shop was called The Blue Mug. Yeah, I kept this on my shelf because I feel like it's one of those books that, I don't know, elusive they say that all readers should read, and so I did. And it was one of those random physical library picks from my TBR video. So this is considered a classic. This is kind of a slice of life story that follows the main character, Esther. It's from her point of view. She's in her early 20s, I think. And it covers about 6 months of her life where she is in college. But while she's in school, I think her and some other classmates win a contest, and the prize is to go work at a magazine in New York. And it basically just follows her life in these several weeks that she spends, the people that she meets, and the expectations that are put on her, and the ideas that she has in her mind of what her life maybe should look like, and it's her descent into madness. If this story were to take place in the current day, she probably wouldn't have descended into madness. This is about a young girl who experiences depression, and people at the time didn't know how to deal with that, and there was no help for that. She's sent to a mental hospital. Basically, it makes things worse. It's a depressing little story. I found it boring. I found the main character unlikable. I will say, however, as far as classics go, the writing style was accessible, but I really didn't find the story compelling. I think that's more of a me thing. My relationship with classics is somewhat fractured. Do I recommend it? Not really. If you want to read a classic, I mean, it's short, and that's another good thing I'll say about it. It's just barely over 200 pages. However, the font's really, really small. Am I glad I read it? I think not so much as I am glad to get it off my shelf. I gave The Bell Jar 2 stars. Next up is The Three of Us by agbaje-williams. This is a book that I have on my electronic library. This book was picked in my TBR game as the lowest rated book on my Goodreads TBR, which was kind of a bummer. I got this from NetGalley a few months back, so I appreciate that I got this copy. I don't even think it's been published yet. I think it comes out in May, if I'm not mistaken. So far, the Goodreads average rating is 3.18. This book is broken up into 3 parts. There's no chapters, there's no punctuation, which really bothers me. Each of the parts is a different perspective, and so you have 3 characters here, and it all takes place in the course of one day. You have the main woman, we'll call her wife. She goes nameless. The only character that is named is the best friend of the wife. I don't know why that is, and I can't even remember her name. So you have wife, husband, and wife's best friend. Really what you're dealing with is the wife caught in the middle between the man that she loves and she's chosen to spend her life with, and then she has her best friend who has been her best friend and her mentor and her confidant and her cheerleader for all of her adult life and some of her teenage life. Her best friend and her husband hate each other. This kind of tells the story of how that dynamic works. Wife is caught in the middle of wanting her freedom and wanting to have fun with her best friend, but then also wanting to be a wife. And she is kind of raised in a family and a culture where that is kind of the goal. I found all 3 characters unlikable. The best friend was possessive and jealous. The husband was spineless, and the wife was just wishy-washy. She wasn't ready to give up her freedom. Why get married? She wouldn't stick up for her husband when her best friend was insulting him outright. I had a hard time with this book because all 3 characters were so unlikable. However, I felt compelled to continue reading because I felt like this was going to have some kind of climax. Like this was all going to come to a head. All 3 of the characters are at the husband and wife's house, and they're having wine, and they're kind of having a conversation and talking about the past. You know, insults are flying about. You can feel that there is a confrontation coming. And it does come, but it's never resolved. I was frustrated by that. I wanted something to happen. Something. Either the wife stands up to her best friend and says, "This is the man I've chosen to live my life with, and don't talk about my man like that," or something. Or I expected the husband to say, you know, if you're going to bring your best friend over here, she needs to treat me with respect in my own house, or she can't come over here anymore, something. If I were to pick the biggest villain, I would pick the best friend because she was clearly jealous and clearly possessive, but that's neither here nor there because nothing happened. The one thing I could say about this book is I did feel things. I mean, I was angry. I was angry at all 3 characters. So there is that, because it does take some talent to make you feel things, especially if you don't like the characters. And I was compelled to continue reading to find out what happens because it was clear that something was happening. I mean, you were heading towards that climax. It just never came. And so that was frustrating. Very readable writing style. I didn't care for the structure. I don't like that there weren't chapters. I don't like that there wasn't punctuation. Would I read another by this author? I think so. But if any of those same things kind of happen in another book, I'd probably have to break up with her. I gave The Three of Us 2 stars. Next up is the first volume of Spy X Family. This is manga. And this is the first of, I want to say there's like 12 to 15 in the series. Manga is always a nice little palette cleanser, and this is a popular one, so I thought I'd give it a try. This follows this. He's a spy, and I can't remember his real name, but his code name, his spy name, is Twilight. He is given a mission, and the mission requires him to kind of have a family, because I believe the mission involves going and infiltrating a prestigious boarding school, because there are people who work for the boarding school, I think, who, I mean, he's tasked with taking down. So he needs to find his way into the boarding school. So he needs a wife and he needs a child. He ends up adopting a child, and he ends up meeting a woman who is in a situation where they kind of start off fake dating, and then they discover that if they were to stay together for reasons, it is in each of their best interests to continue their fake relationship, so they end up getting married. The fun thing is that Anya, the daughter that he adopts, has telepathic abilities, and the wife, which I can't remember her name, she is a skilled assassin. So it makes for an interesting little family. This first volume is them getting to know each other. Well, basically the origin, the meeting, how they meet, and why they are coming together as a family, and then the process of getting Anya into this boarding school. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cute. I'm glad I gave it a shot. I'm not super compelled to continue on with the series. Maybe if I'm in the mood and I happen to see volume 2 on the shelf, I might grab it. If I didn't mention it before, this is a Japanese manga series by Tetsuya Endo. I'm somewhat of a newbie when it comes to manga reading. Sometimes some of the cells are a little hard to follow. I mean, lots of action, which was fun, but sometimes I'd read a couple of cells and I wasn't quite sure what was going on. But the good thing is maybe a couple of pages down the line, they spell it out for you. For people like me, I'm sure. Ultimately, it was a good story. It was a fun story, quick read. It's all in black and white, but the art is quite good. I really enjoy what a manga artist can do as far as the simplicity of the art, but as simple as it is, the emotion comes through in the expressions. Like, for instance, I mean, her face. Look at her face. That really impresses me. So while I'm not crazy in love with this particular manga story, I thought it was cute. I enjoyed it. I gave volume 1 3 stars. The next one I read is Heartstopper volume 4. Now look at this. Look at the size of this thing. This is what I was saying the last time when I read volume 3. And volume 3 and this one are like twice as thick as the first 2 volumes. If you watched my wrap up when I talked about volume 3, I was a little disappointed in volume 3 because when I picked it up and saw how thick it was, I thought there was going to be a lot going on, and there really wasn't. It was very repetitive, I felt, with the theme that was involved in volume 3. And so when I saw how thick this one was, I was a little hesitant, but it's a series that I enjoy and I know I want to finish it. I was pleasantly surprised. I really enjoyed this one. At least I enjoyed it a lot more than I did volume 3. If you don't know, but this follows Charlie and Nick. Charlie is 15 years old and Nick is 1 year older. They go to the same school, but they kind of mingle in different circles. Nick is a jock. Charlie has known for a while that he's gay, and throughout the story, Nick discovers that he himself is bi. They become friends, they fall in love, and it follows their story, and it's super sweet, and it deals with issues that are super important to talk about, and it does it in a way that is just accessible for everybody. The art is very simple but effective. I like this like aqua green tone that is on every page. In this one in particular, you're dealing a little bit more. It's touched on in volume 3, but very on the surface. Charlie's possibly suffering from an eating disorder. Touches on it very lightly in the first one, but you really deal with it in this one. While it does deal sufficiently with what it is to suffer from an eating disorder and what someone is going through when someone is suffering an eating disorder, what this particular story really deals with is that the people that love you can only do so much, and especially the people who you are romantically involved with, who want to try to fix things, who want to help but they don't know how. This really deals with how nobody can fix problems like these, and you're not meant to, and that's not what love is about. And it really, really gets involved with Nick's struggle to help Charlie and what he wants to do, what he can and can't do, what he should do. And I really, really appreciated Osman's shining a light on that, because I think it's really, really important that people understand that, yes, you want to help someone who is struggling, but sometimes the most important thing that you can do, the most effective thing that you can do to help somebody is just to be there and listen and accept things. Trying to fix something or somebody can be more damaging than whatever it is they're struggling with. So I really appreciated this. This had way more substance in it than I thought Volume 3 had. So I really, really enjoyed this one so much more. I gave Heartstopper Volume 4 4 stars. And finally, the last book I read in the first half of March is Vanishing Acts by Jodi Picoult. This was a random pick for my TBR game. This has been on my shelf for quite a long time. I'm a big, big fan of Jodi Picoult. This is one of her older books. I believe it came out right after My Sister's Keeper, and I really, really enjoyed it. This follows Delia. She is a search and rescue person. She has a bloodhound, and she helps the local law enforcement. And one day, the police come and arrest her dad for kidnapping. Delia finds out her name isn't Delia at all, and that when she was 4 years old, her father kidnapped her from her mother and took her across country and led a completely different life under different identities. Her dad told her that her mom died. Her mom was not dead. The story follows Delia trying to find out the truth, why her dad did what he did, and then meeting her mom for the first time. Also, her dad's kidnapping trial. So a lot going on in this book. You're following different perspectives. You're following Delia's perspective. You're following Andrew, her dad's perspective. You're following her two best friends from childhood, Eric, who is now her fiance and the father of her own 5-year-old daughter, and Fitz, her best friend, who is also a journalist for her town Gazette. This was a very fast read, so it was very accessible. I've always loved Jodi Picoult's writing style. I probably finished this in 3 days, and it's not a short book. It is over 400 pages. I was thoroughly engaged in this story from beginning to end. I connected with the characters. I love the way Jodi Picoult writes her characters. They immediately come alive off the page. This story deals with following the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. You also are dealing with repressed memories versus created memories and what triggers them. And then the primary issue you're dealing with is, what is better, a stolen childhood or a troubled one? You are following Andrew and what he has to do to survive in prison and what that does to your character, what it does to you as a human being. You're dealing with themes of addiction in here. And one of the conflicts I found super engaging in this book is Delia herself is a mom, and she finds out that her dad took her away from her mom when she was 4 years old. But she's got a super close relationship with her dad. So her heart says, you know, he must have done it for a good reason. But then as a mother, she struggles with, well, what if somebody took my daughter away from me for, in their minds, a good reason? Delia thinks to herself she would kill somebody who would take her daughter away from her. So very, very conflicted feelings that you're dealing with here. And I thought Jodi Picoult did a really, really good job exploring that. Yeah, if you're a fan of Jodi Picoult and you haven't read this one yet, I would recommend. I really had a good time with this book. But speaking of Jodi Picoult, I want to mention this in this video because it just kind of started happening while I was reading this. I follow her on Instagram, and she has put up some posts. There is a government official, maybe even a mayor of a town. I can't remember what town it is, but someone has pulled 20 of Jodi Picoult's books out of libraries, basically banning her books. She's fighting back, and I'm so glad that she is, because this banning books thing, this trend that's happening right now is just, it's mind-boggling. These people who are in this fight to take these books out of libraries and out of people's hands, the issues that are dealt with in these stories, in their mind, it glorifies, say, for instance, suicide or gun violence. And that's not what these books do. It's not what stories do. It brings awareness to people. And Jodi brings up this point in one of her interviews. And there have been young readers who have written to her saying, you know, I thought about hurting myself and after reading your story. And I'm not saying that these books save lives every day, but information is so important. It's so important. And to make people feel that they're not alone in their struggles is so important. And the fact that there are people out there banning these stories is just, it infuriates me. Google Jodi Picoult. I believe it's happening in Florida. Reach out, if, you know, on Instagram. Reach out to Jodi Picoult and let her know that you support her. I know I do. Anyways, I gave Vanishing Acts 4.25 stars. So that is it. Those are the books that I read in the first half of March. I'm so happy that I was able to bring a mid-month wrap-up for you guys. Have you read any of these books? What books are you reading so far this month that you are loving? I would love to hear about it, or you can just say hi down in the doodly-doo. If you're still watching at this point, please consider giving that like button a boop. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.